Well, hey there, podcast listeners. Already by this introduction, you can tell that there's probably going to be something a little bit different about this episode. My name is Patrick Cadigan. I'm a public school special education teacher. Typically, I am joined by my co-host, Miss Meghan Smallwood. However, alas, it was not to be for this week. Our format, we typically try to follow up with shows about every 2 weeks, right? And we've done pretty well so far. However, as the year has progressed, this one time, we definitely ran into some scheduling challenges. It was our intention to have 2 interviews out there that we would be able to put together and push for you guys to listen to. We're still planning on doing those interviews. However, it's not going to be for this week. So what we have put together is somewhat of a throwback. So a little bit of background. The precursor to this podcast was born from an idea that we had in a master's class on transition. I did an interview with Meghan where we talked about the transition process, and this was very, very early on. And it was actually at that meeting, right after that interview had happened, that Meghan just casually mentions, hey, this is something that I've been thinking, that I'd really like to do, a series of interviews with parents. And, so this is actually kind of cool. And so the conversation kind of progressed over the course of a couple of months, maybe even a year. To be honest with you, it could be even longer than that. But this podcast was born out of that. So being as that we don't technically have an episode for this week, what I was able to do was dig out that original interview. Now, I'm not saying that it's great. It is really rough. We had some challenges with the audio. The previous microphones that we had were not very good. In fact, if I remember correctly, I don't even think one of them worked when everything was working fine until I hit the record button. And then all of a sudden, one of the microphones didn't work. So I will throw it out there. The information is sound, and the interview itself is actually a lot of fun to listen to. Meghan and I are 2 pretty darn likable people. However, the audio is pretty much god-awful. And I did try to fix it up and do some enhancements, but it's still pretty god-awful. But it is something, and we wanted to make sure that we continued with our consistency. So for this week, this is not even going to be a P2 transition 101, anything. This is more, I'm going to refer to this as a supplemental. So that's what it's going to look like in the show notes. But we definitely wanted to have something for you guys to listen to. So I encourage you to please continue to listen. If you can get by the audio, again, the information is sound, and it does go to show just how far we've come in a relatively short period of time. So beyond that, our plan is to have our interviews, build a show, and push those, and we're going to do that in about 2 weeks. So please continue to follow, share the podcast. Don't forget to check out our YouTube channel, where we have done some of the legwork for you. We've curated some videos as they relate to the transition process. I believe right now we have guardianship, alternatives to guardianship, information about ABLE account, and there's going to be some more to come. So be sure to subscribe there as well. Finally, check out our website, which is chock full of information around the transition process. You can find our contact information there, and all of that transition goodness is at www.postsecondarytransition.com, and we will catch you guys on the rebound. Thanks so much. All right. So, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I am good. I am good. So, just so you know, what I am doing, I am now in my master's in special education with a focus in autism studies at Towson University. To that end, this semester we are working on transition. So, part of that class, one of the projects that we have to do is that we were asked to interview a transition facilitator. Could be now the teacher that I have kind of prefaced that it was someone who was working with older students who were ready to either transition out of the program or were going to transition out of the program. So I feel like that's where the majority of the topic will kind of focus. But for the purposes of information and identification, please tell me who you are and what you do.
So I am Meghan, and I'm the transition specialist in Howard County for River Hill High School and Cedar Lane.
And then how long have you been doing that?
This is my 4th year as the transition specialist and my 16th year in Howard County.
Now,
before I was the transition specialist, I was a life skills teacher in the county.
Right. Okay. And if someone who you didn't know approached you and asked you, how would you explain your job? Like if this was a layman, somebody who'd never heard of transition services before, how would you explain it to them?
So I think the best description is that I'm a resource for the parents to help them better understand the timeline of transition from ages 14 to 21 and guide them through it on the school end and help them navigate, the world of DDA, specifically for those on the certificate track, and just be that lifeline, a consistent lifeline, because there's so many changes going on outside of the school that I'm the person that can help guide it through and be there for them and know what they need.
So to that end then, how often do families communicate with you?
So usually when they start turning, 14 and the younger ages, I don't hear from them much. I reach out at the annual IEP. Some are interested in getting an informational session on the calendar, but it's usually once a year at the beginning. As they get to 18 to 21, it's numerous times during the year. It always depends on the parent and how much they want to hear at a certain time. Some are, I don't want to say in denial, but they don't really want to think about what's to come, so they want to wait until that last year, whereas other parents want to get as much information as they can, so they'll come to every meeting. We'll set up numerous one-on-one sessions, visits to agencies, so it varies, but definitely more as they get closer to exit.
And then I know that you had mentioned how you are the transition specialist at Cedar Lane School, and Cedar Lane School is a place that works with some of the most severe needs of adults with special needs. So, could you talk a little bit about the prospects for students with severe needs in relation to job opportunities? Boy, did that sound professional.
A lot of the students there often, that did sound nicely phrased.
Yes, thank you.
You got like the whole DJ thing set up there too. I mean,
I tried, although apparently it failed miserably when I needed to do a mic check, so I still have a lot to learn.
Plenty of time, right?
Yeah.
So the students there, we've got the variety, but most of them require a lot of support. So they're going to need some kind of programming or supportive employment with a job coach or in a day program where someone's there just to supervise for safety purposes and to make sure things get completed correctly. But then we also have the students who really need that medical piece too. And that's often been a barrier I've found in the last few years. Those that have a private duty nurse and need to go, they need somewhere to go after 21. No one wants them to sit at home and do nothing all day after they've been at Cedar Lane and been out in the community and had all this exposure. So there's often barriers with that medical piece and finding a good match. And it's frustrating for parents knowing what they've had in county. And then, all the parents that talk fill the heads with these stories of, oh, wait until when you exit and it's not the same thing and it's going to be a lot scarier. So there's these notions of not good placements available, which isn't always the way. I mean, there are some good spots. It's just a matter of finding the best match for that individual.
Now, when it comes to making a match for an individual, do you feel, is there a formula, or what helps a good match happen?
The more experience the individuals had at vocational practice or opportunities for independence is definitely a plus. The agencies are looking for those individuals that don't necessarily require support with toileting and hygiene. Unfortunately, that's inevitable for some of them, but the ones that can practice that more and not rely on an adult to be right there with them, that's definitely a plus. Those that can do, the one-step directions without anyone, repeating themselves over and over, that's a perk as well. So the more opportunities for independence, the more variety of community places that they've been to. Often when we go visit, I'll try to put in little notions to them like, oh, well, so-and-so's had experience working at the greenhouse. And they'll be like, oh, well, we have a horticulture area here. That's good to know, because they already know, they're already thinking, well, this kid could potentially work here for us. So definitely the experience.
Okay. And so transitioning, get it? Sorry. Moving to, again, a more broad topic of conversation about transitioning. What parts of transition planning implementation do you tend to spend the most time on?
It's interesting. It's different between Cedar Lane and River Hill. Obviously, Cedar Lane, it's all about DDA and all those kinds of pieces after they're 18. I find that's where I spend a lot of time helping parents connect with Social Security. What should they do about guardianship? I'll give them the resources. I can't tell them what to do, but here's some information about it to help you make your decision. So that's a lot of the things I spend my time on, and making sure those parents kind of nail down what they're supposed to do in a timely manner and not waiting until the last minute, because then things get backed up and services can be held up. And then on the comprehensive side of the, like River Hill, it's more of checking in with those individual students and completing the transition pages on the IEP. Not as much as working with the parents as I do at Cedar Lane, which I really do enjoy more so with.
And then do the students that you work with, and again, this is making a more broad question, do your students self-advocate for their needs? And then in that self-advocation, do they strive to reach them?
There's definitely a big push for the students to do that. And I know a lot of the educators are on board to get them to do that. I think part of the battle can sometimes be the family understanding how important it is for their child to self-advocate and not just have them advocating for them. And a lot of them are kind of in that mindset, well, there's always going to be someone there with them. They don't really need to worry about that. But, they still deserve that opportunity to work on it. So it's a constant skill that we want to work on with them. And something just as simple as having them come to the IEP meeting, I find a lot of times that just gets overlooked because they're like, oh, they're not going to, what are they going to contribute? What are the meetings about them?
Mm-hmm.
I once had a parent who had a daughter who was nonverbal, but she always made sure to bring a picture of her daughter and put it on the table during the meeting so that everyone remembered what we were there for. And she was the whole purpose of this meeting. Let's not lose sight of why we're here and what we're talking about. So, and I like that.
So then, do you have an opinion about student-led IEP meetings?
I'm a big advocate for it. It's hard because not being a case manager anymore, I try to speak up as much as I can to get that bug in their ears, hey, let's make sure that they come and they're the ones kind of telling us what they want and this and that. But it also being split between schools, ensuring that always happens is hard. last year I had a couple exiting students over at River Hill, and I was able to actually work one-on-one with these students before the IEP meeting, and we kind of put together a little presentation that they could bring to help lead the meeting about them, because they weren't very verbal, and that was really cool to see. It's a lot of work though, and I think it just kind of gets lost in the sauce, unfortunately, but I really would like to see that happen more.
Okay. What is there a particular method of conversation that has worked best for the students and the families that you've worked with?
About transition in general?
Yes.
It's building that relationship with them, and that's why I really do like going to those IEP meetings when they turn 14 and kind of joking with the parents, oh, well, I know I'm a new member, because they look around the table and they know the OT and they know the PT, and they come to me and they're like, oh, who's this person? And they always say, oh, we'll get to know each other real good because we've got 7 years together. So, building that relationship with them and, just constantly showing up. And I won't hear from parents a lot of times, but I'm always sending out emails about workshops and information and checking in. And every now and then I'll get that parent who says, oh, yeah, I have lots of your information in my email box, and I keep meaning to get back to you. I read it, but, so they know I'm there. And it was interesting in the spring when everything shut down. I had a couple parents who actually reached out to me as their connection to school. I guess just because, we've talked previously and they knew I'd be there. So it was nice to know that the families rely on me, even if I don't always hear back from them.
And then, so in speaking about the professional relationship that you have with those the secondary adult services or adult services versus post-secondary education services, do they relay information well to you? Do you find that there are some that kind of do better than others, or is it just all in general?
Yeah, there's definitely some, in terms of like the certificate track, there's some agencies that are much better about communication than others. And I'm well aware of which ones they are, and I know who I have to be on top of. If I have a parent who's interested in hearing more about that agency, I'll let them know too. Hey, you might have to reach out a few times. But on the diploma-bound side, Doors is the biggest provider that is the connection there, and they're pretty good about relaying information. Even now, with everything virtual, they've been good about keeping us informed of what services are happening and what changes are being made. But yeah, you definitely become aware, and I like to give the parents a little warning because, they know with Howard County, people will get back to them right away. And, I try to explain to them it's a different world out there. So you might have to be more on top of it, and you're the gatekeeper to everything when they turn 21. And I think that's a scary thing for a lot of the parents who have had this, especially at Cedar Lane, this bubble of people who know their child and have the best intentions for their child, and now they're moving on where they have to make sure and check who's going to be there for their child, and they're keeping track of it all.
And do you think the school system itself does a good job of prepping or preparing parents for that transition?
Yeah, and I think it's a fine line because, as a transition specialist, we're supposed to be the resource and guide them. And we've been told, you don't want to do everything for them because at 21, they have to do it for their child themselves. However, I find that there's a lot of parents that really do need that handholding, and you learn quickly which ones they are. And I have no problem sitting one-on-one with the parent and, helping them fill out a form or walking them through a website or helping them schedule an appointment. But they need to be involved. And I have encountered those parents who have said, well, I thought you would just take care of this for me. And that's where I have to say, no, I'll help you with it, but you really need to be involved in the process. Because I don't want to, be a disservice to you at 21 when you go out and you have no clue what's been done or where to start because you had it done for you and you had no involvement in it. So it's an interesting one.
You had spoken before. You had mentioned about completing applications, considering supplemental security income. and then considering like guardianship and alternatives and things like that. So how involved in that process do you get, or I guess the question that I'm thinking of, how involved are you allowed to get in that process?
So we, one of the jobs that we're supposed to do is to give an application to DDA. That's, step number one on the timeline. And I know and it depends on every school. Every specialist does it differently. As long as an application is given at the annual IEP, you're considered, that's taken care of. However, I like to assist them with it because I know it just gets dumped in a pile sometimes. So I'll make sure I sit down with them if they want me to and go through it with them, and then collect the records from school and send it off for them and follow up. But there's no consistency across how it's done across our county, and that's been a huge source of contention amongst a bunch of the specialists, because you have that being done at the one school, like I said, and the other one, it's just, there you go, figure it out. And then with Social Security, at 18, we're told to inform the parent that they have to contact the Office of Social Security and make an appointment and, go through that process. And again, I have specific steps I give to the parent to help them understand what's to come. And I try to answer any question best I can before they go. But, they have to make the appointment and they have to bring the child and do all that themselves. And then with guardianship and alternatives to guardianship, I provide them all the resources and I'll set up the workshops, but they have to make that decision of what works best for them. And sometimes, like at Cedar Lane, I'll put them in touch with other parents who have gone through the process and have said that they'd be happy to talk to other parents. And that helps a lot because, those parents understand each other and are in similar situations. So that's been a great resource as well.
And there was something that you said that sparked a thought in me, and then you said something else, and then that made me forget. When it comes to, okay, so in my class, one of the things that we have done is that we've had to look at a lot of resources. We've looked at flyers that are made available, information packets, things like that. Do you find that the resources that are offered to parents from these sources are easy to navigate, easy to read, easy to understand, easy to use?
Yes.
What was just like, so you think that they're all like, do you think
Not
that like,
all.
Okay.
I think some are, and I like to go through them myself so I can select which ones I want to keep for my file so I can give to parents and then, go through and get rid of the ones that might be a little too much. There's a lot out there, and I think that's what happens. Parents get it, and they just get overwhelmed. So, yeah.
And then what do the good ones have? Like when you look at a resource for a parent, like what stands out to you that you can say, you know what, this is the one that I'm going to put aside and share with my parents later on?
A lot of the ones, it's more of like a Q&A. Like, here's the question. Okay, what do I do at 18? Where should I be going for this? And then like a short summary of what to do instead of pages of, just information that's been generalized. I find, especially at Cedar Lane, there's so many specific cases and questions that they have about their situation. They're really looking for something that kind of outlines different scenarios that they can relate to and use.
Cool. And now you had spoken about this before, but I did want to quickly come back to it. In terms of skill sets, what are those skill sets for students with needs that employers are looking for, if you could give like 3 of the most important ones?
So being able to follow directions from a supervisor, that's a really big one. And that's one that I think they've done a lot of work on trying to get the individuals to take direction from not just that one teacher all the time, from a variety of people so they can follow directions. Completing a task, just making sure that they're done with something before they walk off and, they're not just leaving it half done. And asking for more or what's next. I think those are 3 big areas. And I know like at high school, the vocational teachers and the team really work hard to have the students practice that on a daily basis.
And then I'll say that the one last question that I have, in the interest of time, is what was one particular, if you could be so specific, as one particular collaborating experience that you had between a parent or a family and a community partner that you saw that process just work and result in a positive outcome?
Oh, I've got the perfect one. So 2 years ago, we had a student. Yeah, it was 2 years ago. We had a student exit from Cedar Lane, and the parents were very involved. We visited a lot of different programs, and their student was pretty high functioning, could complete a lot of tasks. So it was a really cool kid, nonverbal. And when they left Cedar Lane, they were still toying with which agency would be the best fit. I know the parents were kind of on different pages of which one they thought would work better. So he exited, and then I followed up with them a couple months later, and they said they had decided with the ARC of Howard County. And I said, oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear. So a few months went on, and I think it was like January. The transition teachers went to go visit, I can't remember the name of the company right now, but it's like a soap producing company up in Elkridge. Someone had made a contact there with the business owner, and we wanted to go see it because she employed individuals from Itinerus in Baltimore. So we just wanted to see what it looked like. And then we got there, and she said she actually had a couple students who just exited from Howard County the previous year, and the ARC had them in a supported employment hybrid program. So they were in the day program at the ARC for a couple days, but then they were doing some supported employment outside of like a group, just one-on-one with the job coach. And she said, oh yeah, we have this really, really cool kid who just came from Cedar Lane. And I said, you're kidding me. So I walked back, and there's my student. And I was so excited to see all those vocational skills he had practiced, for years, and all the hard work he had done. And there he was doing it at a real paid job. And the job coach she said, initially he was there and he's kind of weaned off, and the student was doing it himself. And I reached back out to the parent, and they said, they had really, when they made the decision to go to the ARC, they told him they really wanted to see him employed and work, and he was capable. So the ARC worked with them and came up with this spot for him, and he was a success. So it was that moment where I was like, oh, it all happens for a reason. So it was neat.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I cannot begin to thank you for your time in being able to sit down with me amongst all the craziness that we're experiencing right now. But I really do appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about all this. And so I just, fantastic, and thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anytime.